So you both mentioned there in both of what you were saying that there's a big importance on actually being sovereign and not like you said, Stephen, not the wishy-washy version in cuckoo land, but being a sovereign individual. So one thing you mentioned just then was not having all your eggs in one basket. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? And we'll start with you, Stephen, and we'll move to Warren. What steps would you be taking as an individual to be moving in the right way with the way that things are going in Australia right now?
So the first one is understand what we're talking about with what is sovereign, right? And in my view, it's three pillars, three things. It's personal responsibility, right? I am me. The buck stops with me. I have to be educated. I have to take ownership of what I do. The second one is financial independence, creating streams of income that mean that you are not tied to just one stream, one entity, one dominion, one employer. So you're not slave to one thing. And the third one is legacy, helping your fellow man, passing on what you've learned, increasing your own knowledge, right? Being known and being wanted to is what you want to be known for, what you want to leave behind, and what you want to move on to future generations. So once you understand that if you work to those sort of three pillars, and there is variance on those, but the two very critical ones are your own financial independence and your own personal responsibility. Before you do anything else, unless you are living by those two rules, right, you can't go on. You can say, what steps do you take? Biggest steps to take is those. Own up, say, I am personally responsible for my own situation.
Yeah.
You can't solve a problem if you don't know and take responsibility that there is a problem to start with. Right? So once you do that, then it's the simple steps about getting educated, working out what your goals and priorities and everything are, because everyone's journey is different. Everyone's journey is different, right? Yeah. I have a bigger journey in my mind where I've probably got a larger proportion of charity in my structures and my being than the average person. I'm at 70% plus goes to charity. Right. So I'm at very, very high end of all that. Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's going out. It just means that that's where it's all ending. I'm using as little as possible of what I'm making and what I'm creating, right, to be a legacy. Right. So I'm really where if you go by the churches, it's 10% tied, right? Yeah. And when they talk about a lot of it in the scriptures, they really don't mention tax. Tax is a modern construct, right?
Yes. Yes.
A lot of it is because you were not seen as a human being; you were seen as property. It was what you had to pay the masters to live, right? It was the tide of what you had to give to your masters, your being or whoever that you served. Right. There's another part of the Bible, I can never remember where it is, that says, if you're going to be a slave, be the best slave that you can be.
Yes.
Right. And
agreed.
So that means that you are producing the most for your master, that you're giving the most to master to be given a favoured time to possibly be free. Right.
Yeah.
The ones that we're just always doing the bare minimum, we're never ever going to be free. Never ever going to be their own master or their own sovereign. So you have to be at the next level. You have to be the slave that you can be, and we're all slaves. There is none of us on this planet that aren't a slave. Right? We're a slave to something. Some people it's drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever. Some people it's money. Some people it's narcissism. Some people it's politics. But we're all a slave to something.
Yeah.
And once you believe that, One of the other biggest problems that we have in society today is there's not a lot of people that actually have a grounding in some sort of faith. And I don't care what it is. You know, you might believe in, you know, the toilet paper God, or you might believe in whatever, but you have some sort of faith in being. It's amazing how many times I've sat down and spoken with people that say that they're atheists, but they all have a moral code. And I say, well, you can't be an atheist if you follow a moral code that's embedded in Judeo-Christianity, right? That is centuries old, and it does their head in. What most people that say that they're an atheist, what they really mean is, one, that they saw it on TikTok and thought it was a fucking great idea, which means that they're a slave in a bigger way, or two, right, they don't like the corporatism of modern religion.
Yes.
Right. And if you don't have a faith and a moral code that you stick by, you pretty much cannot be sovereign. You know, because I think, Warren, you did this at one of the events that we did, is it's God, man, the system.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we are always, doesn't matter what your God is, a God could be a goat or a statue in the park. Whatever your God is always above you, your faith, your whatever. So you have to have something above you, right, to become sovereign too. Right. The system is structured by man, right? Yeah. So the system should always be below you.
Yeah, that's what I love with music.
Yeah, these are really the first steps that you need to take. And I know it's what a lot of people don't want to hear. They want to hear that, you know, give me the quick 10-step thing. But it's really, well, when I've been doing a lot of my one-on-one mentoring, and when I've been dealing with a lot of high net worth individuals, it's amazing how many of them have solid families, solid values. They have a 50-year plan, right? And they have a strong faith and belief.
I remember one of my favourite statements, Stephen. I was fortunate in that growing up, teenagers, I grew up in a very, very brilliant churches. Back when churches were less corporatized and more powerful and teaching about New World Order. And I still remember a great pastor once said, he said, a truly humble man of God, you know, a woman of God or whatever, he said, is bold as a lion before mankind, humble and broken before mighty God and higher powers. And that's like my own inner mantra. Like when COVID was going on, I remember saying to myself, I remember saying to my son when the mask mandates came in and they were nervous. So I said to them, I'll never bow before government who dares to do this. I said, it goes against my morals. I said, I will fight. I said, I'm scared, but I said, I will stand my ground and I will fight with a viciousness like a lion. But I said, but before God, I'm broken and ask every day, help me, give me the strength to get through this and serve and help as many people as I can. So in other words, in my mind, I agree with you. Like I'm a total slave to God, to the higher council. And every day I say, I am totally at your service. Just guide me in my business, guide me in my work. I have my own understanding from what I've seen in that, but I agree with you totally. I mean, some of the greatest people I've met as clients are Hindus who have really got a very, very strong faith. I've met some amazing I've got a Taoist client who's so switched on. I've got other people like that. And it's just having a strong basis. It goes back to an almighty God, a creator, however that happens to play out and look. And it's interesting that the Australian Foundations Law to acknowledge that. They say that they will approve you as a religion without any issue, but you just have to show that you have a moral code of beliefs, number one, and you must also show a belief in an almighty God of some kind. And I remember the Scientology case of the High Court in 1979, when they tried to challenge them, and Justice Murphy said, you've got no right to come in here, Mr. Tax Office and Mr. Tax Office, and tell these people what their religion should be. That's none of your business. Do they believe in an almighty God? There's a church called the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, and you can find on Google, which actually teach for the spaghetti monster. I've got clients who set up the Church of Mother Ayahuasca. There's a Church of the Cannabis, you know, I've had clients get that approved, you know. In other words, but the advantages of a moral code is as well as giving you stability in your life. And I see that with James and Edward, like you've seen them as such secure, young men, but they have a strong moral code. They have a strong relationship with, with God as they understand God. I mean, James will tell you when he had very bad eczema, it was a mixture of good eating, but also daily prayer and reminder that God was his healer, and both this kind of faith, like all through COVID, I never had any doubt I'd get through it unscathed because I had that strong sense that I know that if I serve people, I'll be looked after. I knew that within my core. And I don't like corporatized religion. I hate it. I think it's stupid. I've seen it. I've been in it. I've hated what's happened the last 30 years, how I've seen magnificent churches, like a good example is Hillsong. 30 years ago, I used to go to their conferences. I knew Brian. I met many of the guys. I love these guys. I saw the difference they made in my life. They made a massive difference. They taught me good stuff. They were great examples for me. And I've seen that church turn into this corporate monster. And it's been sad to see it from a church that had a big, big impact on my life, And I think that society, there's a very good book by Ken Wilber called The Religion of Tomorrow, where he actually says that the world is crying out for a much more holistic, conscious, less judgmental religion that is inclusive and helps people to grow. Because he said the current religions are stuck in the old dark ages at the moment. They've gone back to that very dark age and they've lost their sense of identity. And a good example to me was you see Scott Morrison, like a man who claimed to be this, and then he actually lost all his sense of values. He just kept changing and chopping. But at least why I can live with Mark McGowan as my premier is at least he has a clear standard and he never deviates. I don't agree with half the stuff he does, but at least he sticks to what he says he's going to stick to, and I can live with that, And I think that we've got to get back to our sense of morals and identity, and it gives you strength in everything you do. You become a philanthropist. In fact, when you read the original Bible, it encourages prosperity. It says a sign that you are spiritual is that you're prosperous. That's actually a sign of God's blessing, that you're prosperous. And that when you lost that moral code, it says you'll be cursed with poverty. So it's interesting. It's the reverse to what people get taught. It says that the sign of the blessing of God is that you're prosperous. It's a sign that you're in alignment with your path. And anyway, that's just my little rant.
Yeah. So to answer your question is absolutely, get yourself. A lot of it's more about you. First. Your real initial steps is about you, and then working out from that what you want to achieve and what you want to leave behind, and that sort of stuff. And some of the best clients that I've ever worked with have been Orthodox Jews who really have, this tunnel vision of it, and they teach, and create whole ecosystems around, what they do, because it's all integrated between, if they keep helping other Jewish businesses out, and the Italians are pretty good at this as well, mainly in the mafia, but it's the same thing is they all go to the same businesses and the same families, because then they help the underlying communities, right? And you've got to realise that it's only since probably the early 1900s, if you wanted to give a date, probably 1911, 1913, when the big changes to government happened. But before that, government was so small in charity, it wasn't funny. That's why we have the great institutions of the world that are all named after people, is because it was their wealth and their spirit and their drive that created all these institutions around the world. It was charity that did that, not government. And that's what we've got away from, right? And that creates sovereignty, because then you take the power away from government. Mm-hmm. Right? Too many people nowadays are giving all their power to government. So
that was a really little powerful segment we had there. And interestingly, Stephen, I remember when you were doing a presentation for the Wealth Mastery on goal setting, and the way you talk about sovereignty there is very similar in that sense. It's more about what's that overarching vision, what is that one thing that's guiding you? Because once you figure that out, it's a lot easier to get those micro steps. And just for a quick recap, what were the three pillars that you mentioned? One was personal sovereignty, and what were the other two?
Personal responsibility, financial independence, and legacy.